Hello, I'm Will Hobhouse. I'm chairman of three very active businesses now and have chaired and been an investor in startups and high growth businesses for 25, 30 years, actually. And we are in interesting times. What's happened during COVID is that everybody has realized that a whole range of trends have been accelerated. So the biggest trend is obviously digital coming to the fore in all our businesses. And for physical stores, this means that what has been happening for the last few years has just come to a head in a much more obvious way. So in most chains of retail businesses, when they start to get to any scale, they'll have about a third of their stores being fantastic, about a third being okay, and often a third that either break even or don't make any money at all. And everybody's lived with that for years and actually accepted that those stores that don't make any money are going to contribute to head offices. And often those head offices get pretty bloated. So what's happened is that the physical stores now have to do a completely different job. And the job is to introduce the brand, introduce the products, introduce the service to local people, to the target market. There's absolutely no need for huge estates of stores around the UK. It can be served from a much smaller number of stores, and those stores showing the brand in the best way possible. And you're seeing it now where people are trying completely different ideas within the stores. You're seeing lots of catering and eating and drinking coming into stores, and you're seeing the stores doing a completely different job in introducing brands to those they want to reach. But I think there have been two really interesting, three really interesting points that have happened during COVID. The first is anyone with a B2C platform has seen increased sales from households in the lockdown. So there are a lot of companies that might have been B2B previously, where they've decided to pivot and go into a B2C or introduce B2C, or already running B2C without putting that much effort into the online, have found growth if they've gone out to look for it. I think in my portfolio, there was one particular business who said that they would go into COVID and, to use their expression, go to war. And they took everything they could to make the business work during COVID and to approach their customers in a way that would be really relevant and really possible to drive during this very difficult time. One or two of the others have been more neutral or been very worried. And I think those who have staff who aren't completely on board have often had a complete nightmare. So it's really illustrated the relationship with any of our teams, the relationship with our staff, becoming much more important than we thought before. Because I don't think any longer are people just going to be able to say, I pay a wage and that's all that matters. I think there's a lot more that matters now to people. And I think everybody's going to have to adjust that and make sure that their relationships and their HR is not just about box ticking, it's about a proper culture that allows people to flourish in what is a very changed world. There's been a great deal of talk about this, and there have not been many experiments that have really got to the bottom of it. There will be no push in the future for people to have more shops. The old world has gone, and in most high streets in the 60s, 70s and 80s, they built a high street that was full of generally standard boxes, 2,000 square foot boxes, where Woolworths or Next or anybody would be in those boxes. And actually that then left residential out of the high street, and often a traffic system that was geared to putting people into car parks and then going into what might be quite a big shopping center or shopping area. The only way it's going to work in the future is to bring back all the other uses into those streets, and particularly residential. Because I think if you had a lot of residential in any town center, you would get rid of a lot of the antisocial behavior. You'd have people who really care about the place. And if you made the relationship between the car and the location work better, in other words, much more pedestrianized areas, you could get a mixed street, not a high street, not a shopping street necessarily, but a combination of shops, leisure, gyms, hotels, restaurants, cafes, and particularly much more residential. And the thing I've always found shocking in my career is often above these boxes that were built in the 70s and the 80s, there are vacant floors. So you'll go down any high street, you'll see vacant floors in the upper levels because the retail was more valuable. Well, now people don't want the retail. Why not use those floors for more residential? And therefore, what has to happen is they have to change the planning system. Without changing the planning system, without stopping people from doing anything whatsoever except straightforward retail, and usually A1 retail, you're not going to crack it. You really do have to change planning. And that includes at a local level. So a lot of local planners are wedded to shopping in the high street, are wedded to out-of-town shops, when actually if you had a mixed street with lots of different things going on, you'd have a much better environment. I think they, in every different country, there is a slightly different relationship between landlords and property law and property norms. Where people have relied on a very long lease, 10, 15, 25 years, and just looked at a yield from a good covenant and sat there just seeing this money roll in within their estate, those landlords are simply going to have to change how they see what they're doing. The good landlords have evolved. So look at Marylebone High Street or Howard Walden, where they've evolved a place that people wish to be and wish to gather through a combination of all different sorts of shopping, cafes, restaurants, etc., and very local residential. Now, most town centres, unfortunately, don't have one dominant landlord. Most city centres don't have one dominant landlord, so it's more difficult to plan overall. But I think anywhere in the world now, you're going to have to see shorter leases. I don't think there's going to be the security of sitting there and saying this operator is going to be there for 10 years. They're going to do great things for 10 years, because the world is moving so fast and the digital first agenda is so embedded now in so many businesses that actually you need incredible flexibility in an estate, even a shopping centre. So there's an experiment going on in Maidenhead at the moment where they're looking at taking out the entire shopping centre and rebuilding it with a mix of residential and leisure and other activities. And I think in a great shopping centre, in a great street, in a great estate, you're going to have to build in enormous flexibility. So you can have working from home, you can have residential, you can have serviced offices, you can have the ability to change the use within buildings. There is highly likely to be a reduction in demand over the main piece in the next few years. You can't see, I don't know how deep the recession will be. Nobody can quite predict where we're going. But actually there's immense space still there for innovative, great brands, great products, great services that can be delivered particularly online. So there's really interesting developments in software, in how to deal with either B2B or B2C operations, how you cut costs out of, for example, physical retail, how you cut costs out of factories, robotics. There's a lot of areas where cost control is at the fore rather than looking at an expansion in demand. It's not all about increased sales. There's many areas now where we can spend less money, frankly, on what we're doing and therefore yield a much better investment, a much better business. And the big one for me is going to be very interesting to see the future of the office. Because with everybody working from home, there's been a huge change in attitudes to whether they wish to commute to work, go and sit in an office, sit in an open space, and in theory, relate to their team and work with their teams, when actually people can achieve an enormous amount from home. And actually it increases their well-being, which actually I think employers are now going to have to start thinking about much more.